Hundreds of billions of dollars for a bunch of failing report cards. President Trump signing an EO that takes action to eliminate the Department of Education and bringing it back to where it belongs, the states.
And hopefully she will be our last Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon. We're going to be returning education very simply back to the states where it belongs. And this is a very popular thing to do, but much more importantly, it's a common sense thing to do. Teachers, to me, are among the most important people in this country. And we're going to take care of our teachers. And I don't care if they're in the union or not in the union. That doesn't matter. But we're going to take care of our teachers. And I believe the states will take actually better care of them than they are taken care of right now.
But don't let President Trump alone convince you that the education department's useless. Teachers union boss Randy Weingartner accidentally just did it for him.
The federal education role is limited. There's no, except for, the Department of Defense schools, which are not run from the Department of Education, or the Bureau of Indian Affairs schools that are not run by the Department of Education. It doesn't control any schools. In fact, it's the states that control schools. So if President Trump doesn't like what's happening in education, it's the states and local school boards that do it.
And it's not just the education department that's getting neutered. President Trump is also cracking down on woke universities. Columbia has until Friday to ban masks and clamp down on anti-Israeli protests on campus. $400 million in federal funds hangs in the balance. And the administration's pausing $175 million in federal funding to the University of Pennsylvania over its transgender athlete policies, forcing women to compete with men in sports.
Hey everyone, President Trump just made one of the biggest moves in education policy that we've seen in decades, signing an executive order to dismantle the Department of Education and return power to the states. But guys, that's not all. He's also taking a hard stand against woke universities, cutting federal funding to those that are promoting anti-Israel protests and pushing radical gender policies. And guys, the left is in full meltdown mode right now. The media is spinning it like crazy. But don't just take my word for this, guys. Watch this clip and see what's really happening.
Katie, I like how the president made the point that we love teachers. Yep. Teachers are fantastic. They do good work. A lot of them are taken advantage of by the teachers union, the bosses, and that's important to remember.
And there are a lot of teachers that are very happy about this move, that they'll have more local control of their classrooms, of their curriculum, and the money that they can use to do what they think is best for their students, considering all the states and school districts are not the same. They're very different. First, A+ to the White House for the optics on this, to have all these little kids sitting around the president in their little ties and dressed up with their desks, and then the massive Sharpies as big as their head, signing at the same time as the president was awesome. Love to see that. But the Republicans and Trump in general have taken the issue of education and turned it into a parental rights issue. You've seen this all over the country. And they're doing this today with this mantling of the Department of Education. They're sending it back to the states based on the Trump doctrine of we expect results. And you don't get to operate for 45 years and then to have in the year 2025, 70% of eighth graders not able to read. We're doing something differently. We're sending it back to a place where the states can compete against each other for the best programs. Arizona, for example, has a great school choice program where parents can use their tax dollars to send their kids to the school that they want to. And then internationally, we have to be able to compete. We can't compete with China if we're going to not be able to produce students who can read or do math and be successful in their life. The education system in America is supposed to help children into their young adulthoods into a successful career in life. They are failing to do that.
How big of a role was COVID in today?
A huge role. I think COVID completely shifted the conversation around education. And if you look at which parties trusted more to handle education, Democrats used to have a huge advantage, and it's basically tied now. Sometimes they have a 1-2 point advantage. You saw it, obviously, in getting Glenn Youngkin in as the governor of Virginia. It was huge. And that Phil Murphy's reelect in New Jersey was close because of the COVID issue in education. So I would never want to minimize it. But Donald Trump just basically had a photo op today. He didn't dismantle the Department of Education. It has to be done by an act of Congress. And I know that really bums him out, that there are other branches of government. She's taking notes. Bureau's taking notes. It's going to be bad. But what he's doing is making life really hard for the DOE to operate. And that's going to have a big effect for sure. Randi Weingarten, and I've said many times, I'm not a tremendous fan of hers. What she is making clear in that interview is that the curriculums are actually set on the state level. So when you look at the lowest ranked states for education, least educated places like Arkansas, places like Mississippi, West Virginia, run by Republicans, that's on them for that. That's not on her. She's not setting the curriculum. What the DOE does and why it was created by Jimmy Carter and why probably you can't get Democrats at least to vote to abolish it is that it's a funding and civil rights enforcement organization. And when I hear Republicans out there talking about their plan for education in America, I don't hear them talking about making sure disabled kids have access to a public education. I don't hear them talking about impoverished
kids. Because we're against it.
I know you are. Thank you for admitting it on such a public forum. They want to end up privatizing it. They want a voucher system, which means that kids who can't get to those schools, don't have enough money to, or frankly want to go to public schools, won't have access. And they also have all of these religious kooks, like the superintendent of Oklahoma who wants to spend millions of dollars on Bibles for the schools, Trump Bibles, because it's all a grift. They want to make it private. They want to make them religious institutions. And that goes against what you're supposed to do in America. So does it need reform? Does it need to be made better? 100%. But come on.
All the Democrat politicians,
Let me tell you
Janine, send
something.
their
You tell
kids
me.
to private
I
schools.
am going to tell you.
All right,
Number one,
I'm ready.
Number one, we are one nation under God, and don't make a joke about that.
Do you think there should be Trump Bibles in public schools?
Number two is the issue that the Department of Education has wasted $100 billion a year. So cut the crap. You yourself admit they don't do any education. Now, you say that Trump is not dismantling. He's already dismantled with DOGE. And let me make one thing also clear. Department of Education was created by an executive order by Jimmy Carter as a payback to the unions. Subsequently, Congress came in and created it, and we're going to end it the same way with an executive order dismantling it, subsequently finished by a decision by Congress. Now, let's be real clear. All of these issues, as it relates to Pell Grants, special needs, all that stuff is being moved to different departments within Washington. They are not being eliminated, and don't make it sound like these kids are being forgotten because they're not. But if you want to talk about no child left behind, if that's what the Democrat liberals believe in, that screwed us up, screwed our kids more than anything, because no kid left behind made sure that every kid passed. And now we've got kids who can't even read at 8th grade level because they were passed. We have a 19-year-old who graduated with honors who can't read proficiently. All of this Democrat nonsense labelism is for the birds. And let me tell you one more thing. The Constitution does not guarantee an education. It is not a federal right. It is not a federal issue. It is something that, under the 10th Amendment to the Constitution, is left to the states. The state constitutions have provisions where you have a right to education. But this is something that is for parents and for educators, for teachers that we do love. We don't love Randi Weingarten and what she did to our kids when she couldn't find one metric in the billions of dollars that we gave her to open the schools to make it safe enough for her and her pals to go to open up those schools. You know what, Randi? Go back to Ukraine for the third time to try to figure out what they're doing in education. And let me tell you one more thing. I'm not done.
One more thing.
One more thing is these kids in China and in Russia that were studying quantum physics while our kids were hiding and doing drugs and alcohol, and the kids in Norway and Denmark and Sweden. We spend more money per kid than any country in the world, and we're losing because of the Democrats. And that's the end of that.
Can I just say one more thing, since we're going to accuse the Republicans of not caring about disabled kids getting an education or poor kids getting an education? The Biden administration threatened to withdraw funding for student lunches if school districts did not force young women to have men in their locker rooms competing with them. So if we want to talk about those types of things, we can, but that's not what the president did today.
Okay, guys. So first, do me a big favor, hit that like button to help get this video in front of more people who need to hear this truth, guys. Wasn't that powerful? My goodness. Trump is finally doing what Republicans have talked about for decades. For years, guys, conservatives have called for eliminating the Department of Education, arguing that it's bloated bureaucracy that doesn't actually run the schools. Now, Trump is finally making it happen, moving education back to the states where it belongs. The left claims that this is going to hurt students, but think about this. How has the Department of Education helped when 70% of 8th graders can't even read proficiently? That's crazy, guys. States will now have more control over what kids are taught rather than being forced to follow federal guidelines pushed by activist bureaucrats in Washington. Many teachers, guys, actually support this move because it gives them more local control rather than being micromanaged by teachers' unions. And guys, with education policies shifting, are we going to see more school choice programs like Arizona's, where parents can actually send their kids to better schools and aren't trapped by their address, their physical address that they live at? Trump is freezing $400 billion in federal funds from Columbia University unless they crack down on anti-Israel protests. The University of Pennsylvania is losing $175 million over their transgender athlete policies that force women to compete against men. This is huge, guys. For the very first time, we're seeing real consequences for radical universities that push leftist activism over actual education. What do y'all think, guys? Should more universities lose funding for prioritizing activism over academics? Let me know what you think. Democrats claim to care about public education. You hear it all the time. Like, we care so much. Like, the conservatives don't care about, we are the ones that care about public education. But why then do nearly all of their top politicians send their kids to private schools? We care so much about public education. I'm not going to send my kids there. They also say that defunding universities is an attack on education. But they had no problem threatening to pull lunch funding from schools that refuse to let men into women's locker rooms. Now, guys, I got to hear from you. I got to know if I'm the only one going crazy here. This is insanity. Should education be run by the states instead of the federal government? Let me know what you think. Should more universities lose funding for pushing radical ideologies? Let me know what you think, guys. Let's discuss this down in the comments. Make sure, guys, you subscribe so you don't miss any more breaking news, conservative commentary. And, guys, if you want to support the channel and help me fight back against big tech censorship, consider becoming a member today, guys. It really helps out with the channel. I appreciate everybody's support. I'll catch you later with another update.